I've compiled a lot from like watching. I learned Japanese in 6 months.
See,
I became N1
that's
in
what they
1 year.
want. That's what
and
they
I
want.
hate those videos.
Exactly. I don't even watch them.
Yeah, I don't watch it either. I see them and
Get
I
out
just
of
like
my-
not
out of my
interested.
page.
And I press the three buttons and not interested.
This is offensive to me. This video.
Like I like harsh feedback, like in that sense. I like looking up to people who did it well.
Yeah.
But every one of these people is like, they always have this trend of feeling. It feels like they're betting on everyone else. Like they're like bragging a little bit. It feels like that. Maybe they aren't. But when they speak about how they learned the language,
they're just like, I was born excellent.
Yeah, it basically sounds like they never had to work for it in that sense. Because in my case, like it was rough when I am not good at languages. Like at the start, it took me a long time to like learn English, for example, or to like understand the concept of languages and stuff is very rough for me. So it took a lot of studying for me to get to this point. Like I've talked to you a bit before about like, the way I started my Japanese. I do not recommend doing it like how much I did it, but I was so into it that it didn't affect me that well back then, but like I needed a lot of work to get to this point. Probably more than some people might need, because I had a lot of people in my class that barely studied anything that was still like at my level. So
okay, next, Robin, who's a language genius,
no.
is gonna tell us how he became basically fluent in Japanese in only 3 years.
Okay,
like
I'm not fluent.
He's fluent, y'all. Okay.
No.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of context. Like, one of the reasons why Robin and I became friends, aka why I chased Robin down because he's an introvert and that's what I have to do to become friends with these people, is basically because, so we're in the same Japanese class, right? But he's like, I noticed his Japanese is really excellent. And the level that we're in, like, it's high level intermediate, which is hard. Like, the stuff we're learning is actually really difficult.
Yeah.
But most of the people who are taking it for the first time are like much below like the level that they're teaching at, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But because of that, so this is my second time taking Chukuni. The first time I took it was when I first came, like a long time ago, right? 4 years, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know what it feels like to be in it the first time. You don't know anything. Everything's overwhelming. You suck, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But now it's the second time. And so I'm at, like, a higher level than most people in my class. But, like, Robin and I are on a similar level. And so I was like, I noticed that, right? And so I want to be friends with people who are good at Japanese because that's who I am. And so, yes, that's why Robin is in my life right now. But basically, I'd like to hear from him. How did you become so good at Japanese so fast? And do you have tips so that our viewers can, like, do the same thing and also get better at Japanese? Doesn't have to be Japanese language learning tips, just like language learning tips if that's easier for you.
I think language learning is probably harder because when I learned Japanese, everyone knows, it's a bit hard to say, but in Japanese we use 3 different typing systems. We have hiragana, which is the Japanese language, like the Japanese writing system. We have katakana, which is the Japanese one used for foreign words or onomatopoeia. Yeah. And then we have kanji, which is Chinese characters imported from China. And these characters are used almost everywhere to symbolize words in daily life. And what I want, when I focused on my studying part, because I'm a very mathematical person, so I work a lot with structures. I'm very good when it comes to structures, like this is how it works, and it doesn't work any other way in some place. And kanji is very much like that. Like this kanji, it has these readings. If you remember these readings, you can read it 90% of the time.
It's not fitting in the structure well.
Yeah, but so when I learned Japanese and how I don't, like, it's so hard because language is so personal. Like, everyone learns at a different way, but I would like to, like, recommend it's, like, a combination of these things. So first one, kanji. Everyone that learns language, everyone that's, like, makes these videos on YouTube say, like, oh, kanji is not important, you don't need kanji, actually, because you don't speak in kanji, why do you need kanji? But,
who's
like,
saying that?
But every time I hear that, wild. I feel so, like, almost insulted.
Yeah.
Because I love kanji. And so I feel like if you really want to learn Japanese, especially if you're aiming to live in Japan, you need to know kanji. There's no
100%.
getting around it. It doesn't matter what
Yes.
you do. You need to be able to read kanji anyway.
Yeah.
And so learning kanji is very important. And however, if you think it's very hard or you think it's very like exhausting, that very many people do. Like, I don't blame people for not liking kanji, but it's very important to push through and learn how to read them. You don't have to do many every day, but at least like a few days just to keep up until you reach the top. And because I think when you get better at learning kanji, so in my course at my home university, we studied 200 characters, 200 kanji each semester.
Oh.
So for I think it's like 3 months, we learned 200 new characters each semester. And so that added up to I think about 800 when I finished my Japanese studies in kanji at least. So, and when I reached that point, learning new kanji became so much easier because you were used to how kanji looks. So in kanji we have what's something called radicals. So what's the kanji's radical? There's each radical in each kanji, and what I learned over time is that usually in kanjis that have these components, it's usually read like this. So and of course in not all cases, it's not always like that, but sometimes you can guess it just by what's the components of the kanji. So once I reached the point of like around 500, 600 learned that I've like memorized, learning new became so much easier and so much quicker because I'm so used to the shape of the character.
That's true.
So everyone who thinks like, you need to know like 2,100 kanji to like live in Japan. Yes, it's true. But once you reach like the threshold of like 500 when you've memorized that, it becomes so much easier to memorize more of them. So it's just reaching the first like step. So that's number one. Kanji is important.
Kanji learning.
Very important.
For sure.
But don't overdo it. Don't do like me. If you don't like it, don't overdo it. Because you can learn a lot of things without kanji specifically. And so the next one is watch Japanese content.
Yes.
Anything is fine.
So true.
Anime, streamers,
Japanese
whatever,
music.
Anything is good. But an important thing is if you're watching it to learn the language, you need to start at the level you understand. So you start you probably can't like understand anything at the start. So at the start it's probably like anything is fine until you learn like a basic phrases or stuff like that. But once you have like, okay, I can speak a little, I can hold like a small conversation, like I can say hi, I live here and whatever like that. You could start maybe watching kids shows or reading kids books or something like that, because the kids books are usually not in kanji, so it's only hiragana. So because those two, when you start Japanese, you start by learning hiragana and katakana. You cannot do anything without two. That's basic, like number one. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do, learn hiragana and katakana.
True.
But so you can probably read like children's books at that point. So it's very important to listen to the language. If you want to be able to speak to Japanese people, you need to learn how the language sounds. Because in Japanese, intonation is very important. I'm not perfect at my intonation. Like I say, I can't understand the difference between candy and rain, which have totally different intonations apparently, but I don't know.
Are they different?
Apparently. But I can't
and
like
bridge and chopsticks apparently
exactly
different.
Exactly. So there's difference between how so hashi, for example, I don't know if this is bridge or whatever, but some characters have like a high to low or a low to high sound, like hashi or hashi.
We're not at that level yet.
So that's important when you become better at the language.
That's like native level
and
stuff.
You learn this stuff, either you study it a lot, like I hate that, so I never did it. And if you don't want to do that, my recommendation is just watch a lot of Japanese content. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's kids shows, anything. Like just watch Japanese content. That's step number 2. You just watch and consume the Japanese content. You basically
actively, not passively.
Exactly.
Like don't be sleeping while you're listening to this. Like be listening.
You can do passive, but that's once you get used to the language a lot. Like, it's later, like when you reach maybe like N3 of the JLPT,
Okay.
you can start passively listening to it, like, or doing chores, you can listen to it. I mean, it's not bad to do it in the start, but it doesn't necessarily do anything because you don't understand anything
Yeah, it's not
anyway.
gonna help you improve.
Exactly. But so
all.
that's something you can do like along the way.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it's very active listening. So for most people that probably want to learn Japanese in the current age, you probably like anime to some certain degree.
We
So
love anime.
just watch a lot of anime.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, because without thinking, your pronunciation at some point will become better. Like in my case, I only became good at pronouncing stuff because I've consumed so much content that I'm basically like mimicking what I've heard for the past like 12 years.
Really?
I never studied like pronunciation
in Japanese.
No.
Are you serious?
I've never like properly tried to learn how to pronounce words.
They didn't teach you that when you were learning hiragana?
Nope.
That's crazy.
My hatsuon, so my pronunciation, is only from listening to Japanese so long. We had a phonetics class.
Yeah.
In my like first semester, but but that was 2 classes in the entire semester in 3 years.
I feel like ours was probably like.
So we haven't done any classes on how to actually speak the language. Of course, we had a class that's called like practical speaking. So like we speak a lot, but it wasn't necessarily here's how you speak the language. Like here's how you pronounce this word. Here's how you do this. We just spoke with each other. Yeah, exactly. So it's just learning how to speak the language, but it's nothing like, oh, here's how you pronounce this sound. Here's how you pronounce this word. This is the weird pronunciation. No one taught me that.
Didn't have that either.
Yeah. So all of mine comes from listening a lot to the language, and a lot of Japanese people think my pronunciation is very good, and it's very like big pride of my own like Japanese that I can pronounce stuff very well, and it also a very like you feel good when you pronounce it well. So
yeah, when Japanese people tell you your hatsuon is good, like that's a huge compliment because
really
like a lot of people from especially other Asian countries, but in a lot of other languages, when you come to Japanese, especially Chinese, I feel like Chinese, like I feel bad for them because it's the hardest for them to like get the Japanese pronunciation words, like to work. Yeah. But like Japanese people, they really appreciate it when your hatsuon, like your pronunciation, is easy to understand because there's so many like maybe English Japanese learners from like China and other Asian countries where like the pronunciation is really difficult to master.
Yeah.
So like when you have got it down, like they really notice and they really appreciate that. So if a Japanese person tells you your pronunciation is good, take that compliment. Exactly. It's huge. Like they really mean it.
Yeah, and you get a lot of this like just by listening to so much Japanese. You don't even have to like say it's not like when I was started to watch anime back in the day. It's not like I was listening to what they were saying and then mimicking it at the moment.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes you would like, oh, now I hear this like ending song in this anime and I really like it. I want to sing along, and you don't understand what they're saying, but you're trying to sing along. I did that a lot, like a few years ago.
I think we're all guilty.
So if you like singing, that's also really good. Just like singing anime songs on your free time or whatever.
Yeah.
But a very big important part of the learning process is just consuming the language, and you don't have to understand everything. You should work on trying to understand most of it. At the start, it's gonna be hard. Like at the start, you're definitely gonna have to start to study more like strictly. Like, oh, I want to learn these phrases. Maybe like using a book like Genki or something. Not that I completely recommend Genki because it's not bad, but it has a lot of people get stuck with these phrases that aren't actually very natural to use in normal conversation, that Genki tries to make out like, oh, this is what we use in normal conversation.
I don't even remember those phrases.
Yeah, I don't either. Because I've long forgotten how Genki works.
Yeah, for sure.
What we used in my university was we used Genki in the first and second semester.
Yeah, same.
So, in a sense, for kanji, because in the Genki books at the back you have a kanji list for each chapter, so that's a good thing about Genki. And you also have basic grammar in Genki. So for that purpose, I don't think Genki is a bad thing. However, you should use it and take it with a grain of salt, because some of the phrases that they use in like example conversation can be very unnatural, or it's not that they're wrong necessarily, but this is not something that you would necessarily hear someone say in Japan. So for those things, I would rather rely on YouTube, like people Japanese people on YouTube teaching the language. I have one that I would recommend, but I don't know. It's what is this channel called?
I had one. Her channel name was Miku Real Japanese. I used to watch her a lot back in the day. I don't know if she's since changed her name, but if you can find her, I definitely recommend her channel. Excellent.
Yeah.
Who else?
I have one. I just need to find.
Nihongo no Mori is another one I used to watch.
This guy. His name is That Japanese Man Yuta.
You like him?
Yes.
Wow.
This guy, he's
a big YouTuber.
Basically, like YouTuber. he has a course how to speak naturally. I was thinking when I started my learning process to enroll in it, but it's a bit annoying to like because I think it's over mail, so it's a bit weird. But it's not impossible. But he has videos like how to like work Japanese into your brain, like how you speak naturally. A lot of his short content on YouTube is like someone commenting why can I say this, and he explains why you can't why you cannot. So it's very helpful in the way to learn how to speak natural Japanese. Yeah. So I would rather use like this type of YouTubers that are preferably that are Japanese, that show like these phrases that we use in normal like language in normal life, rather than relying on textbook for that thing. Because a lot of the textbooks are either very old or they're just too formal in their expressions that they teach you. But Genki is very good for the grammar and the kanji that they go. It's very good like starting point for those two.
Yes.
But definitely just in general, consuming a lot of Japanese content, that's number 2. So number 1, kanji, the writing language. So kanji is number 1. You need to practice kanji.
Got it.
At least a little bit. You don't have to do 50 a day, but maybe like work on 5 kanjis a day for 1 week, and then when you find those, you go to new 5. You work at your own pace. Don't overdo yourself. If you're very passionate about it, don't do it. Number 2, consume as much Japanese content as you can, and try to keep it as close as to your Japanese level as possible. Of course, if you like watching anime, just watch anime. That helps a lot with your pronunciation. So, but if you want to learn like Japanese and you want to I'm gonna watch something without the subtitles, do not start watching anime without subtitles completely. Start with children's shows or stuff like that, because Japanese anime, while it is good to learn, sometimes depending on the anime that you watch, there might be some like weird phrases that aren't actually. For example, like action anime or like
the shonen anime is not
shonen anime
Japanese.
Or isekai anime. So like in other life, such as like Konosuba or those kind of when they go to another world.
Yeah, that's
they
not
tend to
Japanese.
use very old ways of talking when they talk like a magic spell's name or whatever. So it's very non-common Japanese. If you wanna use anime as this like listening practice, I recommend more like. Slice of life anime or romantic comedies that are set in real life and stuff like that. Those are more like normal phrases. You will always hear weird phrases in anime because it's anime. But that's number 2. Just listen and consume as much Japanese content as you can. And then number 3 is use every possibility you can to speak to someone in Japanese that you can speak in Japanese.
1000%.
So if you do. For example, nowadays, I didn't have this when I started, but these like apps that you can, like language exchange apps. So you download an app and you find someone that wants to study your language or English if you're fluent in English, and you want to study Japanese, so you become friend and you talk with this person. And that's an extremely good way to learn how to use the language. In my university, when I had for my 3rd semester, so 1.5 year into my studies, I got my first opportunity to have a language exchange with a student here at a Japanese university, so a Japanese person. At the time, my Japanese was really bad, and half of the conversations was mostly in English, because surprisingly she could speak very good English. So that time it wasn't very nice, but then again in my 5th semester, so 2.5 years into my studies, I got another opportunity to have a language exchange with 2 Japanese people here at the same university, and at that time my Japanese was a lot better, and I learned so much from that. It was like just using the language, because when you study the language, like study a lot and a lot and a lot, you learn a lot, but actually using that in practice is a totally different thing.
Skill.
Yeah, I can read a lot in Japanese, but I don't think I could use half of the words that I can read in a daily conversation without thinking about it. So getting to the point where you feel natural in the way you're speaking, you can only reach that level by speaking.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's probably the hardest hurdle to reach. And
Japanese people are in high demand.
Yeah, exactly. They're very close to themselves too. It's very hard to get close to Japanese people, but that's like the last
that was the
step.
Topic.
Yeah, so that's like the last step into like the language learning. So you probably should start by like learning simple phrases, using apps like Anki. If you know about Anki,
right, y'all.
then
Anki's pretty amazing.
Use Anki. There's a YouTube called Anking on YouTube that does tutorials on how to use Anki, and I definitely recommend using Anki for kanji or for word like vocabulary. There's a lot of decks you can download. So if you go to the Anki like decks website, if you just search Anki deck on Google, you will come up to like an Anki website, and then you can go to like a section that calls decks, and you can just search for anything, and there you can find anything from like the words using JLPT5 to 1. You can find a kanji list, you can find useful phrases, you can find anything basically, and you can import those to your Anki, and there's a lot of tutorials on how to do that on YouTube. So I definitely recommend Anki for when you learn like phrases or like kanji, and so you do that, you do it at your own pace, don't overdo yourself. That's the most important thing about learning, is having fun. That's the most important thing. When you're learning a language, you need to have fun. If you're not having fun, you will hate yourself.
Yes.
I've as a very, very enthusiastic person when it comes to Japanese, I've been through the period of hating studying the language, but since I was in school, I had to study it. I overcame that, but it was rough. So it's just important that you don't especially if you're studying on your own, like as a hobby, don't overdo yourself, but at the same time, try to keep some form of daily study. Like, don't say, oh, I'm gonna skip a day, because when you start skipping more and more and more. So just keeping something daily. It could be 1 word, it could be 10 words, it could be 50 words, it could be 1 kanji, 5 kanji, 10 kanji. You just have to put yourself like, how much can I handle? And then you put that level and you start slowly doing it. And when you have your free time, when you want to watch anime, well, do watch anime. You feel like, oh, I'm gonna try to read something in Japanese, go ahead and try, and don't learn from your mistakes. Don't feel bad about failing, because that's how you improve at the language. You learn by your failures. You learn by making those mistakes, like, oh, I shouldn't have used this phrase in this certain situation, I should have used this one, and then you learn from that mistake. That's how you become better at language. So it's very important to just have fun, and then you work your way up towards the level that you want to reach. But at the same time, don't feel like you're failing. You always should try to move forward and try to learn from your mistakes. And no matter how long it takes, if it takes you 6 months, a year, or 5 years to reach whatever level you're aiming for, it's all about your journey in that sense.
For sure. So
it's very important.
That was awesome. I literally couldn't come up with any tips on my own.
So if I'm going to summarize, so 1, kanji, hiragana, and katakana.
Yes.
Very important. Otherwise, you can't read. And reading is very important. Number 2, engage in the language. Listening to anime, listening to music, watching podcasts, watching streamers, anything has J-dramas, anything that has Japanese. And then number 3, using every opportunity you can to speak to Japanese people.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what level of Japanese you are, you can start at any point, because any of that practice will help you. And that's just my big 3 things you should probably like focus on when you learn Japanese.
Awesome. I love that, because we got to hear that from a tensei himself.
No.
So someone who has used all of these tips to really
like I studied my stuff. And so
Same.
don't do what I did. I
Yeah.
overworked myself into the wall and almost myself over. So.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So, like, Robin may have gotten really good at Japanese really fast. Like, I don't know, maybe other people, this could be a normal rate of improvement. I could be the outlier. Like, I started studying Japanese over 10 years ago, and I still don't believe I'm N1 level. So, yeah, like, I haven't taken the slow and steady route, not on purpose. Just, I didn't have access to that kind of, like, speed route that you did. Yeah. So, it's been, like, over 10 years for me, and I still am not at N1. But I've never hit that wall of, like, oh, I hate myself because I've studied Japanese too much. I've never gotten enough as much as I wanted. So, definitely, everyone has their own pace. Don't sweat it.
Exactly.
But just know that these tips, they work for everyone. Like, Robin's used those, I've used those, and we've both been able to get to a relatively high level of Japanese at our own pace. So, yeah, the earlier you start, the faster you can start making progress. So,
exactly.
Definitely give those a try. And, yeah, if any of you guys have experience with these kind of tips, or you have some tips we didn't mention on our own, go ahead and let us know in a comment below. And, yeah, we'd love to learn from each other. So, thank you for tuning into our video today. I hope you enjoyed our special guest.
Thank you.
Maybe we won't get to see him again because he's going back to Sweden soon. We'll see. I don't know. But
Zoom video.
Exactly. We can do Zoom videos. That would be so fun. So that's all for today. I will see you guys in my next video. Matane. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you. Oh my gosh, my thoughts are leaving my brain. I hate when that happens. Like, I have a point, and then, like, as I'm speaking, it just kind of, like...
It's fair. We all have those moments.
Okay.
All have those moments.